people. Sound like South Park. We're going to read more stories from the Reminisce, or Life in America, the Reminisce book. This is actually a magazine, and sometimes they come out with special edition books like this. In honor of my grandma, I am reading from it all summer long. Today we're going to talk about what vacation was like for families during this time, which is around World War II, sometimes earlier. We're starting with From Sea to Shining Sea. Mount Rushmore, the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls, whether natural or man-made, America's landmarks and landscapes are without equal. I was about 5 years old the first time my parents took me to the Great Salt Lake in the early 1930s, remembers Dean Thornton of Salt Lake City, Utah. On the east side of the lake was a long white sandy beach. I recall my mother sitting on a blanket in the sand while my father took me into the water. He'd put me on my back and slowly lower his hands. Sure enough, I'd float like a cork in the salty water. People came in droves to picnic and cool off at the lake. On weekends, the beach got so crowded that sometimes there were cars from one resort to another, 3 or 4 rows deep. Wow. Today, there are so many tourist attractions in Utah to compete with the Great Salt Lake. The sunsets over the turquoise lake haven't changed, though. They're still just as spectacular as when it was the biggest recreation area in all of Utah. Let this chapter take you on a trip around the U.S. and marvel at the beauty of our country. Salt Lake City, huh? All right, carving Mount Rushmore. In 1935, my father became a carver of granite presidents in the Black Hills of South Dakota. Became a carver of granite presidents in the Black Hills of South Dakota. The Bell Telephone Company in Rapid City had just laid off my dad, George Rumble, when a miner friend asked him if he'd be interested in working on the Mount Rushmore monument. It was the Great Depression, and my father, who had a wife and 3 kids to support, jumped at the chance. Gutzon Borglum, the great man of the mountain and the chief sculptor, asked my dad if he had any experience with such a project. He was hired to do some work on the road leading up the mountain, and did well. Borglum promoted him to work on the grand project. Dad's records show that he made anywhere from 50 cents an hour as a laborer in 1936 to $1.25 an hour as a foreman, and then a carver from 1936 to 1941. When I was 4 years old in 1936, I heard my parents talk about the more than 750 stairs the workers had to climb. I recall going with my mother, Gladys, to take lunch to my dad on the top of Mount Rushmore. We'd sometimes walk up the many steps or ride up in a hoist bucket. I also met the 2 Native Americans who smoked a peace pipe at the top of the mountain to ensure no harm would come to the almost 400 workers involved on the project. They let me try the peace pipe, although I didn't actually smoke it. No one died during the 14-year project, which ran from 1927 to 1941. My father told me he worked on the eyes of Thomas Jefferson and on the facial features of Abraham Lincoln. He even gave George Washington a haircut. After dynamiting strategic spots, the workers used drills and jackhammers to create holes in the granite for easier carving. I remember hearing the explosions and seeing the white clouds of dust from the blasts. I also recall President Franklin D. Roosevelt coming to see the mountain in 1936 for the dedication of the Thomas Jefferson head. Nearby Keystone is where my brothers Glenn and Lyle and I attended school. When work ended on the project in 1941, we moved to the state of Washington and then to California. Standing on top of Mount Rushmore is still an awesome memory for me, and Dad always referred to the to the Mount Rushmore Memorial as the #1 wonder of the world. Oh my God, that's so cool to be able to say your dad helped carve. That's crazy. Look at him. There's the Native Americans they smoked a peace pipe with. That's way cool. All right, monuments to America. Walking in D.C. on Easter Sunday in 1954, my wife was all dolled up while posing near the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. There she is. It's not what we have that will make us a great nation. It is the way in which we use it. Theodore Roosevelt said that. Ooh, at the White House, the Burkett family of Mongolia, Ohio, visited the president's residence in 1952. One of the first White House. Well, I don't remember when the first White House fire was. It burnt down and they rebuilt it. I'll have to Google that. Ooh, in the North Woods. Waiting for the last 2 weeks of August to arrive was almost too much to bear for 3 children growing up in the Northwest Indiana during the 1950s. With the much anticipated time finally come, our favorite Uncle Eddie would arrive at our house. Then we'd load up the car and head out for a summer vacation among the beautiful forests and lakes of Eagle River, Wisconsin. During the trip, our excitement only grew. My 2 older brothers were the lucky ones. They got to sit in the back seat next to Uncle Eddie. Being the youngest, I had to sit in the back seat between Mom and Dad. Oh, front seat between Mom and Dad. I'm like, what? Who's driving? Our dog Patches lay at Mom's feet near our picnic lunch. We were packed in like sardines, but we loved every minute of it. Cars didn't have air conditioning in those days, and August in the Midwest was sweltering. There was no bypass around Milwaukee back then, so we had to drive through the city and wait at endless stoplights in the heat. Finally, we arrived in Eagle River. After loading up on food at the local grocery store, we headed for our rental cabin in Helsinki's housekeeping cottages. That's a big mouthful name. Thinking back on these trips, it sure wasn't much of a vacation for Mom. With the cabin's lack of modern conveniences, she did more work than she did at home. But she smiled through all of it. We spent much of our time swimming, hunting for frogs, cruising in a rowboat, and just playing the day away, whether in the water or on shore. Fishing was also a favorite pastime for me and my brothers, Marty and Jan. We caught some pretty respectable fish in the lake. All too soon, our fun-filled summer vacations were over, and we were already looking forward to the next time we'd be heading up north. I had a family camp on a lake, too. I spent my whole childhood going there until I was 30 when I sold it. I miss camp. Ooh, sticking to a budget. In 1966, our family of 6 set off on a trip to see 19 states and Canada in 21 days, with a budget of only $600. Can you imagine? You couldn't do much with that today. The trip came in under budget, and we saw all the sights we planned to see. As our collection of souvenir window stickers shows, I have fond memories of this trip as I looked at the many stickers we collected. These are all the stickers they collected. Pretty cool, huh? Can you see it? Like old school stickers. I used to collect stickers when we traveled. And those little mini spoons, like the decorative ones. Where is it? They are a visible and nostalgic reminder of the states and historic sites my wife Anne and our 4 children visited together. We left our home in Dallas, Texas in our 1964 Ford Falcon station wagon. To economize, we slept on cots at national and state parks or sometimes just on the side of the road. Many of our meals were cooked over a wood fire, and everywhere we went, we looked for window stickers to commemorate our visit. We saw Niagara Falls and Montecillo. Camping near the Great Lakes and in the Adirondack Mountains was breathtaking. I'm thinking of Montecito, but that's not it. We also toured Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, and New York City. I was in New York City that we got some extra help staying within our budget. An uncle who lived in a fancy Manhattan apartment let us camp out on the floor. I can still remember the curiosity of passers-by as the doorman let us double park our dusty station wagon and its ugly roof rack while we unloaded pillows and blankets. Another thing I remember about New York City is that we couldn't find any state window stickers. Each of our children, then ages 6, 8, 9, and 11, had a duty, such as reading the map, building a campfire, or keeping tabs on expenses. We had it planned that if we stuck to our budget, we could splurge and go to a motel every fourth day. We managed to do it. The trip taught me never to be surprised at anything. At Niagara Falls, for example, I was the last one to get out of the car and walk over to a low wall where we could view the falls. There I found Anne and the kids looking not at the majestic falls, but at a mother spider and her babies busy with their daily chores. I guess the spider was as much a natural wonder as the falls, but I did coax the kids to stand up and see Niagara, and they were thrilled again when we took the tour that led us below and behind the falls, made of the mist. Every sticker we found went onto a window in the station wagon. Unfortunately, we were not able to find a sticker for every place we visited. With only 30 more miles to go before reaching home, we stopped at a Stuckey's, which I'm assuming was a store. And what did we find? Stickers from every state in the Union. We still laugh about that. Anne passed away, but the children and I still talk about the trip and the memories those great window stickers bring back. That's so sad, but so cute at the same time. I love road trips, especially family ones. Mountains to climb. I was 18 years old and feeling adventurous. It was 1952, and I just graduated from high school. My 11-year-old brother and I decided it was time to take a vacation, like city folks took. The 2-week trip to Colorado would be our first vacation ever. We tried to figure out what our total expenses would be if everything went as planned. We'd sleep in my 1931 Model A Ford and camp along our route. The car got about 25 miles per gallon, so we estimated about $40 of expenses ahead. My brother was the map expert as we left Kansas and got on our way. We stopped at Castle Rock in western Kansas before reaching Denver, where we visited the zoo. Then we camped in a park in Colorado Springs. Dinner that night was interesting. We made soup with water from the park's mineral springs, and it fizzled out of the pan. It turned out the water was naturally carbonated. We mixed it with orange juice to make soda pop. That's cool. On another night, we camped on a ridge above an Old West town named Black Hawk. We could hear ragtime tunes coming from a piano in a saloon below and felt like we were in a Western movie. We didn't know the cost of gas would be much higher in the mountains than in the plains. Diesel was the cheaper option, and at one point we tried filling the car with a mix. Oh dear. The result was a trail of smoke behind the car. Finally, a highway patrolman stopped us and asked, Are you trying to make the Smokies out of the Rockies? He was very nice and wished us well on our vacation, but he advised us to go back to using only gasoline, no matter how pricey it was. If you did that today, your car would be ruined. At Garden of the Gods Park, I set about using my skills as a budding artist. Getting out my oil paints, I tried my hand at capturing the beauty of the reddish rocks. My brother had fun looking for small rocks to take home, but his collection kept getting bigger, and I eventually had to put a stop to it. Our little Model A was having a tough time climbing the Rocky Mountains as it was, without a load of rocks. All too soon, it was time to head back east. After visiting Boot Hill back in Kansas, we had a flat tire in Dodge City, and I had to purchase a used tire at a filling station for $15, which I'm sure was a lot of money back then. Luckily, it was the only problem we had with the car during the entire trip. It was a great 2 weeks of freedom, fun and adventure for me and my little brother to share and remember. And with all the jars of carbonated mineral water we brought back with us, we were making our own soda pop for quite some time. There they are, aren't they cute? Oh, can you imagine just letting your 18-year-old son take your 11-year-old son and just drive? Parents would probably never let that happen today. Golden getaways, California camping. Luxurious. I can read, I swear. Luxuries were few for most people during the years of the Great Depression, and our family was no exception. We were fortunate that Dad had found a good job in the oil fields near Goleta, California, shortly before the Depression hit. Oh my God. And that he held the job. We're going to start over, kids. Golden getaways. Luxuries were few for most people during the years of the Great Depression, and our family was no exception. We were fortunate that Dad had found a good job in the oil fields near Goleta, California, shortly before the Depression hit, and that he held the job throughout those hard times. We even got 2 weeks of vacation each year. My mother, sister, and I really look forward to those times off. It was our summer vacation, an escape from the daily grind of the Depression. An outdoorsman who loved to hunt and fish, Dad always took us camping. We'd go to a California park or go to one of the state's many lakes, including Huntington Clear, June, and Blue Lakes. When I was 6 years old, Dad made a trailer to pull behind our 1936 Nash Rambler. In the trailer were tents, cots, blankets, canned food, a Coleman stove, a lantern, and fuel. Dad also made a cooler for butter and meat out of a wire and plywood. He'd soak burlap in water and drape it over the wire sides, which made sure to hang the cooler in a tree. We made sure to hang the cooler in the tree high enough so bears couldn't get to it at night. That's how they made coolers back then? Whoa! At Big Basin Redwood State Park, we had to watch out for the deer too. They looked tame, but they could be aggressive, coming right up to your table for food. Some of my favorite trips were to Yosemite National Park. It had an amphitheater with log benches where I hate Mercury retrograde. Where the nightly entertainment included park staff dumping garbage on stage to attract bears. Visitors could sit and watch the bears come and eat. My dad used to take me to the dump to watch him eat. Bears, I mean. At the close of the evening, we watched the park's firefall. Staffers created the illusion of a waterfall of fire by pushing burning coals over a sheer cliff. What a sight for little kids to see. I bet that was probably cool. We also had fun along Yosemite's giant fucking spills in these books. There's an oil spill on it. One of the big trees was carved out so cars could drive through it. This book is really old. My grandma gave it to me like 10 years ago. I have many fond memories of our summer trips during this bygone era. Life was hard, but we found a way to have wonderful times together. The highlight of our trip to Yosemite National Park in 1935, when I was 7 years old, was the drive through the giant... Maybe that's the same word. Sequoias? Known as the Wawana Tunnel Tree. Oh, the tree! Yeah, I remember that. Where you could drive through it. I've never seen it, but I've heard of it. In 1951, we were on our honeymoon. My wife Jane and I had a picture taken in our Dodge as we posed by the same tree for a souvenir snapshot taken by a park photographer. The tunnel was cut through the tree in 1881, when it was estimated to be 2,500 years old. Holy shit. The tree finally fell in 1969 during a winter or heavy snow, and the road was closed all winter. I wonder why I never seen it. It was gone long before I was born. In the summer of 1952, our dad, Henry DuBois, took my brothers Don and Ed, my sister Kathy, and me on a month-long trip from Waukegan, Illinois to California and back. In the picture with the bear, Don is standing by our 1951 Kaiser and Ed is leaning out the window. When we passed through Death Valley, California after midnight, the temperature was still 125 degrees after a near record high of 132 that day. Holy crap. In the top photo, you can see this. It's all stained up. We're skipping that part. The Grand Adventure. Back in 1925, our parents took my sister, Bertha May, and me on a trip to the Grand Canyon. Bertha May. I was only 4 years old at the time, but so many details of that memorable trip still stand out clearly in my mind today, especially a colorful character who befriended us. My parents had pitched a tent to serve as our sleeping quarters near the canyon. One night, an old gentleman with red hair and a long beard stopped by our campsite and asked if he could share our fire. When my parents said yes, he offered to tell my sister and me some stories he recalled from the Old West, and I'll never forget the exciting tales he told. Wide-eyed, we listened with rapt attention to the stories about his meetings with Wild Bill Hickok, Calamity Jane, and Buffalo Bill. He was such good company that my parents invited him back to share a campfire several other evenings. On the last day of our vacation, before Bertha May and I were sent off to bed for the night, the old gentleman told us about his 2 donkeys, Temporary and Dynamite. Temporary was nice and gentle, but Dynamite was mean and ornery. I can't read tonight. Wherever. The old cowboy promised my sister and me that before we left for home that morning, he'd put us on Temporary's back so my folks could take a picture of us. He was true to his word, standing proudly next to Temporary, and the photograph my dad took was R. Earl Gardner. On the back of the photo, my mother made a note that Mr. Gardner was 78 years old. There they are. On the mules. Wow, 78 years old. Years passed. In 1937, we were living in Arkansas City, Kansas. By then, Bertha May and I were in high school. One Sunday morning, Mother looked up from the newspaper and exclaimed, "Wait until you hear this." She read aloud an article that described a pioneer couple who'd gone west in a covered wagon with their baby son sometime during the last century. The wagon was attacked by Indians and the couple killed. But when the Indians discovered the child, they were intrigued by his red hair and decided to spare him. He was raised as an Indian and eventually spotted by some cavalry soldiers when he was nearly grown. The soldiers convinced him that he was not really an Indian. From that time on, he served as a scout for the army. Mother said, "This is the story of R. Earl Gardner, the very same man who sat with us and told us those stories around the campfire at the Grand Canyon." According to the story, Mr. Gardner, then nearly 90, had written a complete account of his life, but wouldn't let anyone publish it until after his death. Unfortunately, it never was published as far as I know, although Life magazine did publish a picture of old soldier R.E. Gardner in a 1972 story on the 100th anniversary of Yellowstone National Park. Now, of course, I'm sorry I never saved that article. Still, I'll always cherish my brush with the Wild West and memories of an old Indian scout who made a trip to the Grand Canyon even more exciting for 2 little girls. That would be so amazing to be like, "Oh my God, that's the guy that we just met in the freaking Grand Canyon on our trip." Wow. The world is really small when you think about it. Winter wonderland. Narrow path. Heavy snow left room for only one car at a time on this country bridge near Doyletown, Pennsylvania. Ruth and Earl Huntsberger of Davidsville shared the photograph. They were managing a nearby farm at the time. Oh my God, this looks like us all winter. Look at all that snow. It's just down to one lane. Polar explorers. My wife Dot. That was my great-grandma. Her name was Dorothy, but everyone called her Dot. I called their grandma Dot my whole life. My wife Dot and son Don were on a winter outing in the area around Oak Ridge, Tennessee. When these slides were taken in 1947, I worked at the Oak Ridge National Laboratory from 1944 to 1980, and Don got a job there as an engineer. Look at him. That's the engineer guy, I think. Ooh, on the Jersey Shore. My husband George and his family are seen in 1930 on their annual stroll at Atlantic City's boardwalk. From left are Albert, George Elise, and the kids' maternal grandparents. Look at them. That's the original Jersey Shore cast. There you go. Leonardo Beach. In the early 1900s, my grandparents, great-uncles, and great-aunt built 2 bungalows side by side in New Monmouth, New Jersey. Monmouth. That's some weird names, Jersey. Our family spent every summer weekend on Leonardo Beach. The photo at far right shows my mom, Elizabeth Jelly. That's her name, Jelly. And her mother, Florence, in 1946. The earlier photo shows Grandma on the left with my mom and great-aunt Merle Parson. Jersey Shore Beach. Oh, it's alive even back then and kicking. We'll read one more. It's called Island Summer. At the end of our school year, my family would flee the New York City suburbs and drive at the breakneck speed of 25 to 30 miles per hour out to the eastern shores of Long Island. That was fast back then? Oh my goodness. On the inside shore of the northern peninsula was our little piece of heaven, a cottage near Jamesport. The rented cottage sat alone in a field of tall grass about 100 yards from Flanders Bay. Farther down the road, almost out of sight, was a year-round house. Other than that, we were quite alone. The rustic cottage included 2 bedrooms, an all-purpose living room, and a primitive kitchen. Electric service consisted of single light bulbs hanging in the middle of each room. The plumbing was a simple hard pump in the kitchen. What? Our only other plumbing was a 2-seater outhouse across the dirt road, near some bushes and poison ivy. Sounds like fun. The cottage is where I spent some of the first summers of my life, from 1936 to 1945. We children were free to roam and explore. We swam, climbed trees, rode our boat, rode our bikes, dug out hiding places in the bushes, played croquet, caught butterflies and fiddler crabs, and only after our chores were done. My Mother's Day was quite different. She spent much of her time in the crude kitchen with an ice box, a 3-burner kerosene stove, and a 2-burner hot plate, and a portable oven that was moved from burner to burner. Mother did the laundry by hand with a washboard, pumping the water and then heating it on the stove. What a job! Oh, the aching knuckles! She took it all in stride, although she did say that she had to get a vitamin shot after we returned to civilization. Poor thing. Doesn't seem like the women got to relax at all back then. During the work week, Daddy stayed in the suburbs with my grandmother. But on summer weekends, he was ours. He rode the Cannonball Express to Jamesport every Friday evening. My middle sister Carol and I would compete to see who would be the first to see his train as it came down the railroad tracks, belching great plumes of smoke. Then there was Daddy, stepping down from the railroad platform. the pockets of his business suit filled with chiclets or lifesaver candy for us. A good part of the weekend was spent fishing. Daddy loved to fish and taught us how to bait a hook and set it when we felt a nibble on the line. We learned how to clean the fish and prepare them for a meal. As much as I loved being with my father, I would dissolve into tears when I saw the poor fish dangling from the barbed hook. I would beg Daddy to return it to the water, which he always did. Pretty soon, I was no longer invited to go on these family expeditions. Sounds like me. I was like, put it back, Dad. Oh, it's dying. When we saw the shallows, we knew it was time to leave behind the lovely, warm, sunny days and our summer vacation. Before returning to the suburbs, however, we underwent the olive oil ritual. The salt water of the bay and the baking sun had our hair into wild, wiry frizz bombs. They must have been Irish. My mom's remedy was to drench our heads with olive oil, which had to stay on all day. No swimming underwater during the day. In the evening, we would undergo several shampoos and thus be presentable for suburban society. I still relive these summers in my mind. Our cottage getaways were a wonderful gift from my parents that has carried me through the many difficult times that we have to face in life. For this, I am eternally grateful. Aw, there's their parents. There's their little summer cottage. Cute, right? Get that woman a stove, would you? Jeez. All right. I hope you liked the reading. I know I messed up a lot. It is 3:50 in the morning. What can you do? At least I got all my stuff done. The only thing I didn't get done is how to recognize toxic people in your life, but I will be getting to that this week. If you like this, if you want more of these in the future, please hit the like button below, hit the subscribe button, hit the little bell, share this to whomever. Thanks for spending some time with me and learning about history. See you next time. Bye.